Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 76 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Evan Harrison, CEO of Kiss the Ground. If you don't know what regenerative agriculture is, then you aren't alone. Research showed that just a couple of years ago, only 4% of the US population understood what it was. But thanks to the determination of organisations like Kiss the Ground, this is changing. Regenerative agriculture is a powerful and growing movement, which at its core is so much more than simply a way for farmers to farm. It is a remembering and reconnecting for all of us to the food we are consuming and the soil beneath our feet. It offers us a truly viable solution for both personal and planetary health, a more prosperous life for the farmers who feed us and steward the land, and more nutrient-dense foods available in our local communities, which is the foundation to improving our own health and well-being. There are 4 core principles to regenerative agriculture, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It is an ecosystem approach, where we learn to listen, work with and respond to nature. It is not new, drawing on the practices from Indigenous people, but it has an amazing capacity to offer us solutions that are already having an incredible impact on our health and environment. Evan is a passionate advocate for storytelling and reminds us that it's important to meet people where they are and share information that will excite and inspire others. With this in mind, Kiss the Ground have available an incredible diversity of information and resources to support consumers to find healthier food, but also to share the stories of the farmers who are writing a new story for humanity, one in which both nature and humans can thrive. Everything they do is in support of farmers, so make sure you check out the resources in the show notes to find out how you can build momentum for this incredible movement. And don't forget to go and watch their latest mini documentary. Welcome, Evan, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really very much looking forward to speaking to you and talking about the amazing work being done by Kiss the Ground. But just before we start, I always ask my guests to share a little bit of their nature story. So just really any part of nature's impact on your life, any fond memories, anything that you'd like to share to get us started would be lovely.
Well, thanks for having me, Fiona. And I'd love to share a nature story. That's why I do the work I do. I was born where I am today in New York City,
Oh,
and
wow.
we moved out to the suburbs. And really, some of my earliest memories that I go back to in nature were visiting my grandparents who lived in Manhattan, in the concrete jungle until they passed. And they always escaped the city to upstate New York to a lake called
Oh,
Copake Lake. And
beautiful.
there were these little cottage communities right on the water. And that was my earliest memory of nature. But then fast forward to a couple years later, I remember my mom and I, probably right around this time of year, we went to the beach one day when I didn't have school. Probably we were closed for Jewish holidays. And we just sat on the beach. I was really young, watching surfers. And I just sat there. I'd always loved the ocean. And I sat there with my mouth open the whole time, just like in complete disbelief that I was watching people synchronize movements with waves. And that was it. So I've been a lifelong surfer, and that is by far my deepest connection with nature. Surfing never ceases to amaze me, humble me, ground me, and
Yeah.
just connect me to understand how important it is that we as humans flow with nature.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you something, the second we think we can control everything, surfing it can be very humbling. So it's a top nature love of mine for sure, still to this day.
Oh, I love that, Evan. That was fantastic and unexpected to hear of your passion for surfing. I think I had a guest very early on who was a surfer herself, and I often talk about the ocean and just how it is just this really sort of has this sort of therapeutic effect on us. Just the rhythm of the waves and just a grounding and a humbling essence really of like the immensity of nature and our very small place within it. So it was lovely to hear of your memories of that and your involvement in that. And I guess it's interesting that your passion is the ocean, but you kind of your work now is focused on very much the soil and the ground. With Kiss the Ground, who you've been with for, I think you said about 3 years now.
Yeah, 3 years and several months.
Yeah, I think I came across them a little while ago, but for many people who possibly listening to this podcast might be aware of them, is their amazing documentary that they put out. I think was it around the time of COVID, sort of 2020 time,
That's
of the
right.
same name, wasn't it? Kiss the Ground.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's I always sometimes get carried away because I've sort of known these subjects for a while, but do you want to just explain a little bit about what the sort of regenerative agriculture is and the ethos behind Kiss the Ground for people?
Yeah, I'd love to. And Fiona, it's a fair comment. Like, well, hey, you're a surfer. Now you're working on soil health and with farmers. I don't get it. It's really, really a very organic story. I've always, while in the music business for a couple decades, really helping the transition from an analog world to a digital world. I always served on the board of a nonprofit that spoke to me. Some were in the music space, but then I wound up joining an amazing nonprofit that's been around for about 41 years, called the Surfrider Foundation, because I'm a
Okay.
surfer, and the
Yeah.
mission was to protect beaches and
Yeah.
keep the water healthy. And I love doing that work. And while I was living in Colorado during the pandemic, I was doing music festivals at the time. My daughter was volunteering for a local nonprofit in Colorado and came to me and said, "Hey, I'm organizing for this nonprofit a film screening, and it's pretty cool. Can you promote it at your music festival? I'll give you the trailer." And she gave me like a 5 minute clip, and I think she said something to the effect of, you'll probably know the narrator, some old guy, and it was Woody Harrelson. And I saw the 5 minute clip, and my mind was blown. I couldn't believe that I was on the board of an environmental nonprofit, and I'd never heard of the term regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
And I kind of dove into it from there and started to think about how my skill set could be applicable in promoting a something a little further, a viable solution for not just climate issues and planetary health, but also for human health.
Yeah.
And it was actually a very natural transition to get connected. And what I realized as I dove deeper into the opportunity was, okay, so this film came out in 2020 called Kiss the Ground. And I started scratching away the layers. And what I realized was there was a grassroots nonprofit 501(c)(3) that started up in 2013. And they had learned about soil health and how soil health is really at the root of sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, which leads to climate health, as well as adding, when you have healthy soil, there's more nutrient density in our foods. When it rains, the water gets absorbed, and instead of running off, with healthy soil, less need for inputs, as they're called, chemicals that are used in modern day farming. And what I realized was, okay, so the movement, the early stages have already been done by this amazing
Yeah.
501(c)(3), and they brought in these amazing award-winning filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, who had their own company called Big Picture Ranch. And the story is that the organization, which was founded by so many in Venice Beach, California, Ryland Engelhart, one of the founders, had been working in the vegan food space. And they brought this eclectic group of people together. They brought in academia, they brought in farmers, and really, I would say they were really a big spark of that movement
Yeah.
starting in the United States. It kind of put the movement on the map when the film came out, as you mentioned, in 2020. But then there was all this interest, and people got really excited.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
And so they realized they were in that next phase of growth, and there was a search for a CEO, and I found them, they found me, just very organically. And what I realized was I wasn't alone in not knowing what regenerative agriculture was. It was
Yeah.
actually the early days. And like most industries, for those who've been working on it for a dozen years, in the US, talking about it for that long and around the globe, it was pretty humbling to pull up the brake and realize, well, wait a minute. First of all, this isn't new.
Yeah.
It's becoming a conversation that's new again, but indigenous indigenous cultures and so many around the world just called it farming. That's how
Yeah.
farming was done
Yeah.
before the industrialization, before there were more mouths to feed, and before there were these discoveries, which were all well intended, of more efficient ways to produce more food. So, what I learned was when I began this work about 3.5 years ago, only 4% of the US adult population could answer in multiple choice what regenerative agriculture
Oh,
is
wow.
in any way,
Wow.
shape, or form.
Wow.
And so I realized we needed to start by really meeting people where they're at,
Yeah.
because I've been a part of early stage movements, and like in the music industry, when there were lots of conferences, people would talk about you know the rights associated with music files and compressions of the files. And not only was that not incredibly interesting to me, what I realized was that's very important work. And those conversations do have to happen, but it's not where I can make a difference. I'm too impatient. So I would rather go create a music service today and
Yeah.
give people who are accessing AOL opportunities to connect with their favorite artist. And that's what we did. So we're applying some of that thinking here at Kiss the Ground, which is we want to bring this movement to the tipping point,
Yeah.
that 20-25% of consumer demand. And the only way to do that is to make people aware of what regenerative agriculture is and how it's a viable solution for both planetary and human health, and how it works. Some people want to go into, the science. Some people just want to say, oh, so I should just look for food that is sourced or fiber that is sourced from a farm that has healthy soil
Yeah.
and participates in a more ecosystem based approach to farming, which means instead of one crop, multiple crops, least disturbance based on the context of the farm. Pretty easy to understand and easy to grasp stuff. So we create content every single day to get those stories out. And as such, the movement's growing, and we're very inclusive by nature, because like I said before, those other deep conversations absolutely have to happen. And we partner with the industry, I'll call it, at large, to make
Yeah.
sure we're meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, I love that. It's I think through my podcast, I've like more and more, I sort of came at it from I'd been in the wildlife conservation space and, was very much aware of, people conserve what they love, and therefore you have to sort of engender this love into people. And I was, I use my photography and things to try and like inspire people to be, excited about the natural world. And as I've done the podcast more, I've realized how intertwined the social justice aspect of it is with the environmental impacts and the climate change. And I think your more recent film, Common Ground, has touches a little bit more on that, doesn't it? And you've touched on it there about the fact that, you're this is kind of ancient practices, this is the wisdom of indigenous cultures, and and pre the industrial revolution of farming. And it's I mean, one of the things that you meant that comes up in the film is, I think, the US president back in like the 1930s, Roosevelt, and he had like this sort of vision for working with nature in farming. And it's kind of, it's the knowledge has been there, but we took a path and we kind of, all the eggs went in that basket, and we went full throttle down with the synthetic inputs and the monocultures and the row crops and mass production. And we didn't know, I suppose. We were naive to the long-term impacts of that, and now we have been seeing for decades, actually, the detriment that happens to the soil, the loss of topsoil, the loss of life in the soil. And regenerative farming is just, it offers us so many solutions, doesn't it, to not just the environmental side but the social side. Because I think something that I talked about recently with a guest was, the mental health of farmers, and they're at an absolute breaking point, aren't they? The suicide rate within farmers is shockingly high compared to the general population. And I think that's one of the other sides for this for me is, it's giving these people who are, the old saying, the salt of the earth, aren't they? They're really hardworking, and they're trying their best, and they're just stuck in this difficult equation with the farming system we've created. And I think that's the beauty of regenerative agriculture for me, is it's about the people as well as the land, and it offers them solutions and a brighter future as well.
Yeah, I mean, you packed so much in there, and it's all spot on, Fiona. Uh, I'll share a couple of thoughts. First up, I agree. Our filmmaker partners did a fantastic job with the follow-up to the film Kiss the Ground, which was named, after the work of our organization from the earlier days. And there was a lot that still needed to be told. And they listened to a lot of feedback after the first film. And what they realized was they wanted to go deeper, to tell deeper stories about all of the effects in really diverse, a diverse array of scenarios across the United States. And I think they did a really phenomenal job touching on cultural, community, societal effects as well. And what you painted is a picture that is accurate of a system that we've just simply outgrown. Our food system, was built the way it was for a growing population. And I just heard a speaker from the Audubon yesterday. She was actually on my panel before I spoke, and she gave some quotes about the deterioration of grasslands as alarming as the soil depletion. And I kind of flip this all around and talk about, yeah, and nature is so incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
She also talked about, as we do, if we work with nature and we let her do her thing, amazing things start to happen. The biodiversity, and she talked about the species of birds coming back, and we look at bees and bats and there beavers. There's just so much good that comes from slowing down and pulling back some of the practices that have become mainstays in, especially in monocrop, single crop productions over the years. Again, it's not as simple as here's the manual, go do it. Regenerative agriculture is really a system that starts with what is the context of your surroundings. I've worked with a lot of farmers and talked to a lot of farmers who have experimented and found, well, hey, what works for me on this part of my farm doesn't work on that part of the farm. And this is in grape growing, the vineyards, because of a very modest altitude change.
Yeah.
They had to apply different approaches. So, the regenerative practices are really, they're unique based on the context, and it oftentimes requires some experimentation. But what I hear over and over again is so much hope and so much promise with immediate returns in saving costs on inputs. So we've documented hundreds of stories of farmers where they try different approaches, and we hear all the time, well, I didn't believe that my business could actually do better. And let's keep in mind, farmers are in business and have to make
Yeah.
money, and
Yeah.
we support that completely. And I love hearing the stories of, I really didn't believe this was going to work. Having a 18-inch cover crops in between my rows of my production, and all of a sudden what they're saying is, well, I spent so much less money first time around, and while we didn't yield as many crops, my profit will be higher, number one, because I spent less money. And number two, the soil health is incredible now. When we had rain, the absorption level was exponential compared to what it
Yeah.
had been previously. So somebody said yesterday, find me a farmer that doesn't want healthier soil. I don't think there's such thing. So it's very inspirational to me, telling these stories of the brave farmers who are trying these techniques. And a lot are just simply saying, hey, it would be great if the subsidies aligned with what we're doing, but I've got to take this into my own hands because my soil is depleted and I can't keep doing things the way we're doing them.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is it's you mentioned earlier that it's really like at its heart a grassroots movement, and I think that's where like this amazing power is, isn't there? That it is important to campaign at the sort of intergovernmental level, international level to hopefully get and garner support in the long run, but actually this is something that farmers are already doing. New farmers are moving into it, and that's one of your things that you've sort of nurtured, isn't it? Is you've actually created a program within Kiss the Ground to support farmers, to offer them grants and support to move into this system as well, haven't you?
Actually, everything we do at Kiss the Ground is about supporting the farmer.
Yeah,
First, by creating consumer awareness and
yeah,
consumer demand, that is kind of the air cover, that really drives the movement to that point where people start to get curious and say, I never really thought about where this is coming from. And I never really thought about whether that field has been sprayed with fertilizers that contain nitrates, or the field, this vegetable actually has levels that are unsafe of Roundup
yeah,
because that's what the farmer had to use. So the first level that supports farmers is to get that awareness of people being more curious about where their food is coming from. And, I will tell you, it's no longer grassroots. Uh, 18 months, 2 years ago, when we did that first survey, only 4% knew about regenerative agriculture. Now, 7% of the US adult population is aware of regenerative agriculture. But what's really interesting is 74% of the US adult population wants to purchase foods when they're in the supermarket or wherever they get their food from that will make them healthy,
yeah,
their own health.
yeah,
And, not surprising, right? People want to feel good, people want to be healthy. Uh, Yet only half of them read food labels. And what's worse, of that half, only a half of that understand those food labels. And the number one word on food labels that people react to is natural. And the word natural is not regulated.
yeah,
It doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
So there's this big disconnect. So by bridging that gap and starting to educate, inform, and also in an entertaining way, hey, you ever get confused when you go to the supermarket? Print out this guide with you. Bring this guide on your phone with you. We demystify some of the claims. We share what these really important certifications are so people make informed decisions. That supports farmers by bringing the movement to that tipping point of consumer demand. But then from there, it costs something to create content every day. That is our primary focus. And then from there, as people want to learn more, we provide free education materials for them to learn more so they can then in turn become advocates. And then all proceeds are now going directly to fund farmers directly. And you made a mention to us supporting farmers directly. We do so in two ways. We started with our $500,000 in direct to farmer grants this year. We wrote $500,000 in checks directly to 215 farmers across the
Oh,
United
wow.
States, different size farms, different geographics, like very diverse group of farmers and a lot of first-time farmers, which is so incredibly uplifting. And we're helping them solve problems, everything from education classes to supplies and equipment. So I'll give you two examples. One farmer has integrated cattle into their farm, which is amazing for a whole host of reasons. And they wanted a more efficient way to do regenerative planned grazing for that cattle. So we helped them purchase a electric fence so they can
Okay, yeah.
easily move their cattle according to a plan where they graze, they don't overgraze, and then they move on, let that field rest, and beautiful things happen very naturally to the grasslands in that field and ultimately to the soil health. We had another farmer who grows produce in the Southeast and said, I want to prove, because I know it's true, that the produce, that the fruits and vegetables I'm growing are more nutrient dense because of this regeneratively, farmed, healthy soil. And so they have a local university, and that paid our grant to them paid to run that test. So this
Oh, fantastic.
$500,000 will equate to 73,000 acres of farmland that is being transitioned from current techniques to regenerative farming practices. And going forward, our plan is to continue every cycle of now we're telling those stories of those farms, the before, the during, and the after, and then we'll repeat and we'll give out another direct to farmer grant and we'll tell those stories. But all the while, we work with hundreds of farms and soon to be documented thousands. And what we've done is we've created a map on our website so we can connect local communities to help support those
Yeah.
local regenerative farmers. So that map is going to be, it's in beta right now, and we're going to launch it in weeks, not months. And it's going to start with 500 farms that we've already worked with. And it's going to encourage our vast and growing audience to support their local regenerative farms by, whether it's buying a farm box, by volunteering, or simply by, letting the community know that the farm is there.
Yeah, I love that because I think it's so important. I think so many you touched on like consumers, wanting to buy healthy food and not knowing how to buy it really, and it gets very overwhelming. And I think that's what's really wonderful is that you have this kind of multi-pronged approach that, there is although it's all helping the farmers, like you're helping consumers as well so that they can be conscious consumers of what they're choosing to spend their money on and what they're choosing to support with their dollars and their time and their energy and effort, not just for the environmental impact, but also very importantly, like you touched on with one of your grant systems, that the food is healthier, it's better for people. I mean, I know we have slightly different agricultural systems in some respects in the UK to what you have in the US, in that a lot more of our cattle tend to be on grass and out, whereas a lot of your sort of meat cattle will be in your these sort of feedlots, aren't they, where they're literally, they're not out grazing, they're being fed corn inputs and inputs from the arable side of agriculture. And it's so important to offer people these tools to be able to reconnect with their food. And I think that's what's the beauty of what you're really doing at its heart, is this storytelling. You're putting people back into this conversation. It's like, they're not just going into this sort of bland, supermarket space of artificial lighting and row upon row of things. You're putting the farmers' faces there, you're putting their stories out there, you're making or giving people the opportunity to really connect with the farmers and also the impact that they can have by supporting the farmers, which is what gives us hope, I think, doesn't it, as consumers, that what we do can have an impact as well.
Fiona, you've mentioned the Kiss the Ground film and the Common Ground film, and I would be remiss not to mention, hopefully your audience has seen those films and will spread the word on those films. But I would also encourage you and your listenership, everybody who really wants to spread the message, to think about meeting people where they're at. So when I meet up with my friends who I've known for decades from the music industry, they don't necessarily want to talk about soil health.
Yeah.
That's fine. You know what they want to talk about? A great steak. And
Yeah.
that's cool because I could talk to them about how, well, did you know? And we are about to launch a mini documentary. What we found was we need to create not only content every day to really move the needle and to grow our audience and to grow the awareness, but it needs to be multi-platform and in different formats. So we create some content that's made for reels on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, Meta. But so the bite-sized content, little pull quotes, just things that are easy to share. But what we've really kind of grabbed onto as a sweet spot is the 10-minute mini documentary. We started creating these mini documentaries that we call stories of regeneration, where we look at one farmer, what their challenge was, and how they turned to regenerative agriculture and what the outcome was. As a matter of fact, our last film, which was about a farm in the middle of the country, that these two farmers, they combined resources and started all these regenerative practices. One had cattle, the other one didn't, and they went in together to buy some new equipment. And it was a really, really amazing story of ingenuity and how it brought a community together to rally around this regenerative farm. And that's gone on to win. We've won about 12 awards now at film
Oh,
festivals
wow.
across the country. And based on the momentum of that, we're super excited. November 5th, we're going to do a virtual meetup. So anybody who wants to join, and I hope you'll come, just sign up for our newsletter on kisstheground.com. We'll invite you to this meetup. We're going to debut a new mini documentary, and I'll tease right now what it's about because you brought it up. It's about the production of it's about the dairy cow and
Okay.
how the dairy cow used to be a dual purpose animal where the cow would graze on grasslands and produce amazing dairy. And then when the dairy dried up, the cow would continue to live longer, get nutrient dense grasslands, exercise by foraging, and then become amazing steak. And the cow in the US, as you mentioned, has really become either it's a dairy cow or it's for beef production. And our next stories of regeneration is all about bringing back an old approach. And really the question is, can beef be raised right here in America without being imported that is as flavorful and as tasteful as Wagyu? And we have chefs telling that story, chefs who are also farmers. So it's a really, really interesting way to bring a consumer who may not understand or really want to talk about soil health to think about, so I'm eating beef that is, being produced in a way where they're being fattened up by GMO corn in many cases, and a cow is never meant to eat, corn,
Yeah.
whether it's GMO or not. So there are a lot of different ways to tell these stories and connect people to the sourcing of their food in very uplifting ways that are very promising about not only how we can consume nutrient dense foods, but prosperity for the farmer as well. Because dairy farmers who can then, in turn, have a much greater return for that cow, after it's led a longer life and become a fully produced, dual dual purpose, really is helpful to the farmer as well.
Yeah, I think this is the beauty of it, isn't it? And I think it's I mean, my podcast is all about nature and basically this interconnected web of the world we live in, and the fact that, one of the things I am very passionate about is health and, sort of alternative of health approaches. And obviously diet is the foundation of health, and then you move to understanding farming, and farming is the foundation of healthy food, and there we go from there. And it's, for a lot of people, that's perhaps the thing that really might sort of be their entry point to this conversation, isn't it? Is really this sort of idea of a healthier diet and a healthier lifestyle. And then which is what you guys have been so amazing at, is basically taking all of this amazing knowledge of regenerative agriculture that has been there, and then actually like helping people to realize the fantastic impact that it can have on their lives. So it's not just a nice to have, oh, we're helping the environment. It's like, actually, this is vital for our own health. This is about our health and well-being, is as important a central pillar in the conversation as it is about the health and well-being of the natural world. And I think that's what's exciting about this conversation, isn't it? You've kind of got these two pillars that are now intersecting, where people have become much more aware of like their health and the diet, and then you've got people who are aware of the environment and the impact of the environment, and it's helping you move towards this tipping point. You mentioned the tipping point, and just in case we didn't clarify that for people, it's this idea of basically we kind of building enough momentum to get to that certain point, and then it becomes this sort of exponential growth that like kind of feeds itself as it were, without the input. But you have to put that sort of input in now. And I think perhaps what people who maybe have not had a chance to watch, I'll have all of the links to your amazing website, your resources. I hope people will go and watch the documentaries. I think they're both on Amazon Prime for people at the moment, so they're quite easy for you to access that way. It's just, sort of like you said, meet people where they're at, and just realize that, we can be part of this story as well. We can help build this momentum to help farmers and help, create this change that I think so many people are craving, but they just don't know how to see it happen. And I think it's really exciting. I know we talked briefly in the before about that your history was in the music industry, and you sort of went through this massive change in the music industry, where we used to have like physical records. I remember, I'm old enough to remember that you used to go to the record shop and buy, whether it was a record or a tape cassette, and then a CD, and then we moved into streaming. And it can be quite daunting, can't it, to sort of, you're at that point where the industry needs to change and is changing, and you find yourself sort of caught up in that. But it's also exciting, and it can provide lots of opportunity.
Yeah, I think first of all, the tipping point thing, I've always said my whole life in the work world, momentum breeds momentum. And when you have momentum, that is lightning in a bottle. And you have to really capitalize on that momentum and really, bring people along with you. And, I will talk a little bit about, how I experienced this in the past. I loved surfing and skiing, nature sports, and music as a kid. Those were my primary passions. I wound up fortunate enough to break into the music industry because I loved art and I wanted to promote artists. I didn't want to be a performer. I wanted to promote performers. And I learned the traditional business from the ground up. And I started in the mailroom in San Francisco, and I learned the distribution part of the business. And the number one thing we dealt with there was people didn't know when their favorite artist was releasing new music. So it was about awareness. That was the biggest obstacle at the time. Everybody was replacing their cassette collection with CDs because that was the new exciting technology at the time. Back then, you went to a store and there were big stores like Virgin Megastore was in Europe as well. Tower Records started in the US, expanded, and then there were chains and malls, and that's how you purchased music. So I learned how to promote music through those channels. And then I was asked to join a corporate team in 97 to more efficiently let people know that our music was coming out through digital channels. I said, that's great. I love New York. I'll move to New York, but I don't know anything about the online world. And the answer from our corporate team was it's 1997. Nobody does. So I simply embraced that there was new technology and new and more efficient ways to reach people. And it didn't take long to realize that it was already happening. The consumer demand was already there. I went to a research session we did in Los Angeles, and it was with college kids to see how they consumed music. And they would go onto YouTube and use a YouTube converter and just take the song, convert it to an MP3, and that became their music. So all of the business was trying to figure out how to stop theft. So then on the outside, there were companies that were created from Napster to, there was Winamp to control kind of organize all the files. All these great innovations started to happen. I see a parallel happening right here, right now, because to your point, consumers to the tune of 74% are saying, I want to feel good. And I know that there is a connection with food. I just don't know how it all works. So it's already heading there. And the growth of the movement is really about providing solutions that are easy for people. And we saw music change in so many profound ways when easy solutions came in. I was part of one of the earlier ones where we created a music service at AOL, and AOL was built. It stood for America Online, but then there was an AOL, in the UK. There was an AOL in France. There was an AOL, AOL in Germany, and it was all about America Online. So easy to use. No wonder it's number one was one of the slogans back in the day, because people didn't know what the internet was and they wanted a safe and
Yeah.
easy way to communicate and soon to consume content and information. And that's what we provided, a music service that was so painfully easy where people would come online to check their email. And then all of a sudden, whoa, there's Alicia Keys. I think I heard a song on the radio. How can I learn more about her? And we have a performance in studio. Like, it was a really simple way to connect people more deeply with their music. As we at Kiss the Ground make it easy for people to understand when they go to the market, what some of these confusing labels mean. When we make it easy for people to understand that, oh, when you support a regenerative farmer, this is why it's good for your health. And this is why it's also an added benefit for planetary wellness. Soil health matters. These are the things that are adverse effects if you don't have healthy soil. These are the things that are positive effects of having healthy soil. So we're just going to continue telling those stories until that movement gets to that point where it really can't be undone. And to go from 4% to 7% awareness in 18 months, that's a strong data point. There's so many strong data points. Our awareness at Kiss the Ground in that time period among that audience grew from 10% to 15%. In the general population, it grew from 6% to 9%. So that's one touch point. We're not the only ones telling these stories. We're not the only ones, playing a critical role in the movement. Our film partners are off making the third film now. And there are so many different ways to come at this problem. Everybody I'm meeting at Climate Week is approaching the problem and the challenge from a different perspective. And we're completely, we celebrate that. It's
Yeah.
got to be a movement.
Yeah.
There's not one company, there's not one approach.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually just gonna just say because obviously predominantly you're US centric, you're US based, it's you know US farms, although some of the content is definitely like transferable in terms of like your produce guides for people around the world. But regenerative agriculture is worldwide. We were sort of mentioning before we came on actually that I lived in South Africa, and actually my first awareness of regenerative agriculture was with a very interesting guy called Alan Savory, and he was in Zimbabwe for a long time. He's been one of another, you know, as another aspect who's gone out and really helped raise awareness of this. Also, where I live in the UK, we have a big annual conference very close to where I am, where they do bring together lots of regenerative agricultural specialists. They do talks, give lectures, have sort of education things. It's based on a regenerative farm, so people can get out and touch the soil themselves and learn more about these amazing practices. So it is something that, you know, although we're talking very much in the sort of US sense, that actually wherever you are in the world, you know, there will be organizations and people that you can connect with who, and there'll be regenerative farms that you can go out and support directly. And it's just I just love it because actually at its core it's very simple, isn't there? There's four principles of regenerative agriculture that are just a very they're very simple, but it's has this huge impact, and it's the fact that you don't till, which is so you're reducing the disturbance of the soil. Obviously, historical agricultural people might be aware of, you know, sort of the plough. That's so we've done away with the plough. You're using cover crops so that you're keeping cover on the soil, so you're reducing the soil erosion, and also cover crops help with nutrients and things. And then you're using often using animals as well in the system for the benefits that they have, because the plants evolved alongside the animals, and it's this, you know, beautiful relationship between the two, the dung, the movement of the animals to spread the seeds and sort of recycle the nutrients in this nutrient cycle, and then also the reduction or ideally complete removal of synthetic inputs as well, which we mentioned as well. So it's just this it's sort of it's working, becoming a co-creation and in partnership with nature, which is what you touched on with your vineyard of like, you know, you have to just you approach it, it's not, you know, coming with the iron fist and sort of imposing your will. It's sort of being much more in touch with your environment and in touch with the soil, ideally touching it, feeling it, smelling it, just being aware that this the soil is just this huge. I mean, we talked about the ocean earlier, didn't we? But that actually the amount of organisms in the soil is just incredible, isn't it? It's just the whole kind of universe of life just in a little handful of soil.
It's absolutely humbling when you learn how the microorganisms both in we've all started talking much more about how our gut biome plays such a role in our human health. Well, it's the same thing in the soil. And, you know, that's not a conversation that many people have really had. And it makes just so much sense. You did a great job describing what regenerative agriculture is. So, really, not much to add there other than really saying it's not an all or none. Not everybody can do away with tilling completely. Not everybody has enough space for animal integration. So it's really it's about experimentation and, as you said, an ecosystem approach that makes the most sense within the context of that plot of land. And then importantly, really listening to nature and seeing how it's reacting with as few inputs or as, you know, few aids of fertilizer, chemical, as you know, synthetic, especially, as possible. So you did mention that we're in the US, and that was by design. What we said was, let's follow where the big films footprints are. Let's really start where we are in the United States first and make sure we're supporting farmers in the United States telling their stories. There's so much diversity in farms and in in farmers across the United States. So let's start there and then expand out as the third film will go outside of the United States. We will start to have a much larger footprint. We've also done quite a bit already outside of the United States. We have a partnership program where we work with 22 companies of different sizes in different verticals. And what we've been asked to do for some of them is do some education workshops with their UK division. So we have a partner in Anthropology, an
Oh,
amazing
okay. Yeah.
retailer, an amazing just an amazing company. And we had 100 of their team members participate in a workshop in a 90-minute on-demand regenerative agriculture course that we make available on our website. So we've done things outside the United States. We have a partnership with a really amazing certified regenerative coffee company called Buena Vida Specialty Coffee that is based in Costa Rica. Because what we find is when we go to a conference, like we're here in Climate Week, there are, I think, about 2,000 people coming through one section of the conference who will be drinking our partnered regenerative certified coffee. That's a great way to get the message out. Well,
Yeah.
what's that mean? And everybody's going for coffee to stay awake because they were having late nights and long days learning. And we find that through partnerships like that, we're really getting the message to people in a different way as well. So you will definitely see more involvement outside of the United States. So the farmer map, the grants direct to farmers, all of that will expand, as well as the storytelling outside of the United States in a much more profound way.
Oh, it's exciting times, Evan. Really exciting times to be involved with this. I think that's the thing. It's there is this sense at times that it feels a bit overwhelming what we're facing with the climate crisis and also sort of social issues that we're facing in our society. And then I speak to amazing people like you and the work that Kiss the Ground's doing, and I just, I can't stop smiling. I mean, this will be a video as well as the podcast, but I'm literally, I feel excited and energized having spoken to you, knowing that it's, you've got an amazing team, but Kiss the Ground is so much more than just your amazing team. It's all of these incredible farmers who are out there who believe that there is a different way and they're writing this new story that you're able to tell. Basically, they're creating this new story, new but old story, but they're writing their own chapters in it for us to be able to witness and for you to be able to share with us. And it is exciting, and I think that's the thing that we have to sort of hang on to at the times when we're feeling a bit overwhelmed and despair is actually there are just incredible people out there who do want to make a difference. They want to see change, and actually they're already out there doing the hard work. And really, from a consumer point of view, we just need to find them and support them and help them have a bigger and greater impact. And I mean, generally, most of the listeners, I think, will probably fall into the consumer category, but obviously there might be farmers, and if there are farmers, then to know that we want to see them successful as well, and we want them to get the appreciation for the work and the hard work that they do and be paid fairly. And I think that's what's so brilliant about it. It isn't about creating wrong or right. It's just about moving towards a way that works better for everyone.
Very well said. I think it was one of my favorite songwriters and artists, Ray Davies, was quoted at some point saying like, "Yeah, there's so many things to complain about, but I choose the other. I have no time for that. I choose the other." And you heard that in a lot of his songs, a lot of hope and a lot of positivity as well. But I choose the other. I choose the positive and the hopeful conversation. I'm inspired every day by business people I meet, by consumers, by farmers certainly. And there is so much to be hopeful about. And I always really look at when the pendulum swings to the negative, it comes back with a lot of force to the positive. And it's strange to me that I'm in New York City right now for Climate Week meetings and speaking in a bunch of Climate Week settings while the UN is meeting and there's world powers, and some of whom are dismissing completely that there is even a climate issue. So, back to that quote, like I focus on the other. You know,
Yeah.
People care about their personal health, and the connection to food and how that food is sourced is undeniably connected and a powerful solution. So we focus on telling those stories, and the heart of it is really the farmer and supporting the farmer.
Yeah, I love that. It is a powerful solution, and I think sometimes we forget how powerful we are to help create that powerful solution, and we don't have to sit back and wait for the politicians to to remember. I think I had an amazing guest quite a few years ago, and we were talking about products for your home and how to choose like healthier products for your home that were less toxic and healthier, and she said the same thing. She was like, basically, actually it's the consumer will ultimately create the legislation. Like the legislation will almost be sort of like a rubber stamp because the movement has already happened and already created it, and then the legislation will follow. So, I think as consumers need to always have that in our mind, is the fact that actually we can drive the change. We don't have to wait for the train to pull into the station. We can get onto it before
Fiona,
then.
it's
Yeah.
already happening, and your other guest was right. And yeah, some people tell me, well, there's all the things. Oh my God, pollutants in my house, microplastics in my blood, and everything I consume. Like we can easily get overwhelmed, but that's why I really go back to keep it simple, meet people where they're at. Not everybody needs to do, as we call it, all the things.
Yeah.
And we refer to regenerative agriculture as a viable solution
Yeah.
for our personal and planetary health, meaning it doesn't have to be the only form of farming. However, as people start to ask questions, demand will make it a better opportunity from a farming perspective. And then all the benefits come with it. More prosperous life for the farmer, more nutrient dense food for local communities, not all of the things. I mean, who doesn't love getting local seasonal foods?
Yeah.
It's the taste is just it's night and day. So,
Yeah.
this is a growing solution and it's a really exciting time. And I'd love to invite your audience to jump on board and, beyond. Obviously, you have an audience. What a great name and a great concept, nurtured by nature. Let nature nurture us. So your audience is already doing the thing. What I would encourage everybody to do is just look at our content, and those 5 friends that you have that don't do all the things and don't go as deep as maybe we all do, just send them something that meets them where they're at
Yeah.
and see if it's of interest to them and go from there.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because I think, sometimes we can be a little bit almost evangelical, can't we? The born again. We're like, oh my goodness, it's so
Well,
amazing.
that
I want to like tell you everything. And it's like, yeah, just, find the thing that's going to resonate with them, that's going to help them, that's going to, start them on their journey or be the next step on their journey. And that's a really, really good piece of advice for people to take away. I know, I feel like I could probably talk to you for ages, Evan, but you are in the middle of New York Climate Week, and I need to just be mindful of your time. So we've covered so much, and I think there's some amazing resources for people on your website, Kiss the Ground, which I will have a link to. But is there anything else that you would just like to share with people as we wrap up today?
be hopeful and bring people along for the ride
Yeah.
where in whatever capacity that means. um, it's happening. We're moving in the right direction, and this is it's a tough time
Yeah.
for many people for many reasons, And I just really like to focus on the hope and the change that's already happening. So thank you to you, Fiona, for welcoming me on the podcast, and to your audience for participating in the way that they do.
Oh, my pleasure, Evan. It's been lovely to speak to you. I always enjoy speaking to people who have this like massively diverse background of like corporation and then coming to non-profits, because I think it's also just a real reminder to people that it doesn't matter what your journey has been in life. You know, you have valuable skills, you have valuable knowledge, and you have a valuable contribution you can make. And I think you're the perfect example of that, you know, you've come from the music industry, and here you are like championing soil and regenerative farming for everyone. So it's just a reminder that we all have important skills, and we all have something to contribute as well.
Well said. Thanks again, Fiona.
Thanks, Evan. Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.